Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia. That, of course, is Dan Harris and Kyle Yates, and it's you. And today it's all about the waiver wire. Week 1 is in the books just about, and Week 2 is on the precipice. So, of course, it is time to start looking ahead for the players we want to overreact to and add with all that free agent budget that we have, all of this free money. We somehow have to spend it somewhere, don't we? I mean, don't we have to spend it all at once? I didn't get the memo that we couldn't. But don't worry, take a deep breath. We're going to take you through all the names potentially that could help your fantasy team in Week 2 and beyond. And of course, there's nobody better to talk about this with than, of course, royalty here on the podcast today, because Dan Harris, for those of you who don't know, was actually the rest of season accuracy competition #1 ranker last year on Fantasy Pros. So Kyle Yates, we must humble ourselves, I guess, here in the presence of greatness with Dan Harris. Am I right?
No, I'm not doing that. Not doing that for 1 second. Not to Dan Harris. Dan, really what I'm taking away from this is that you're like King George from Hamilton. Really, that's like just what I'm taking away here. That you have kind of the same demeanor. Really, you're just the same person.
Wow. I can only assume a fully armed battalion will be sending over to Yates' house at some point in time. Dan Harris, Kyle Yates refuses to bend the knee. Does that mean war?
First of all, I can't believe you stole my joke. That's what popped into my head as well. No, it doesn't. It just means that Yates' judgment is better than it was last year. As much as I will dine out on the championship for the rest of my life, I admit that this is a new day, new year. We got to get going, and it's time to overreact to everything we saw yesterday.
Oh, yeah, and I'm sure there was nothing to overreact to whatsoever. Everything was so obviously how we thought it was going to be. But you're not alone in this fight. We're here on the podcast for you, and we're also there on all the tools on Fantasy Pros. If you head over to Waiver Assistant, that's at fantasypros.com/myplaybook, and My Playbook is amazing. It manages all of your leagues basically for you. You can have all your teams up at one time, make moves all on one page, not have to go back and forth, whether you're playing on ESPN, Yahoo, CBS, doesn't matter. My Playbook can do that. Plus, don't forget about the obvious, amazing autopilot feature, which is brand new, which makes moves if somebody's out late and you don't know about it, and you're out hanging out for a bike ride or going to church or at the game for your kids. Autopilot takes care of it for you, but you gotta get My Playbook in order to do that. It's also got the Waiver Wire Assistant. Now, the Waiver Assistant there displays all the add drop scenarios that will improve your roster. It shows the available players that will improve your team and by how much. And you can see the impact it's going to have on your lineup when you add those players, which is phenomenal. So head over there and start using that Waiver Assistant. And I know what you're saying. You're going to say, Joe, but that cost me money. Well, not that much. fantasypros.com/offers. Make a $10 deposit on one of our partner sites. It's a very easy thing to do, and you will claim 6 free months of our Hall of Fame package. That's right, 6 free months. That's a $65 value for just a $10 deposit at fantasypros.com/offers. I don't know what gets better than that. You don't have any excuses, so go do it right now and listen to the King Dan Harris, because he told us that if you don't, then bad things will happen. So show Dan Harris so he doesn't have to remind you about his love. Believe me, you do not want that. I've had that once or twice during baseball season. No more reminders from Dan Harris. Now, boys, we're going to go through all the positions here, running back, wide receiver, yada, yada, yada. Before we do, I thought it would be a quick, fun look back at Week 2 of last year. Here's some of the names that we were all just dying to spend some money on. Here's number 1, Malcolm Brown. Remember all the Malcolm Brown touchdown equity in Week 1 last year? Oh, we were all chasing that. I know I lost a lot of money on him. Some other names here, Nyheim Hines, very popular addition. Benny Snell Jr., Paris Campbell, Adrian Peterson, Alan Lazard. Boy, oh boy, the gifts just keep on giving. Now, one gift did, and that was Robbie Anderson. So there was a diamond in the rough, but there was also Gardner Minshew, and there was also Joshua Kelly. So, Yates, when you hear all these names, does this give you pause on the amount of money you want to spend here up at the front of the season?
Yeah, completely. When we look at the waiver wire and some of the guys who had standout performances in Week 1, it's important to temper our expectations and not necessarily go super crazy here with, throwing 30% of your fab, especially with this list that we're about to talk about. There's not any of those players that I'm looking to absolutely just drop a ton of fab on. So staying measured, there's a lot of guys, especially at the wide receiver position here, that all kind of fall into the same range where it's like, I'll put in bids on all of them for around the same amount, and then whichever one I get, I'll be fine with. So yeah, we're going to dive into that. We're going to take a look, but yeah, definitely looking at these guys, there's not that one like true standout that I'm like, I got to add this guy this week.
Now, Dan, you have a sort of quality from a character from one of my favorite Pixar films, Ratatouille, of the reviewer, Anton Ego, and he always enjoyed a fresh plate of perspective, I feel like. And I feel like today I'm giving everyone a fresh plate of perspective with some of those names. So how willing are you to kind of start blowing money and throwing dollars around and making it rain after this past group of games we just saw Sunday?
I don't really care what happened last year in terms of what the week one waiver wire options did or did not turn out to be. Every year is a new year. Every week is a new week. So the fact that last year was 95% completely irrelevant players that we were looking at doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me right now is that the vast majority of people who we're looking at on the waiver wire right now are probably not going to make an impact based on what we saw this week. But there are a few select guys who I agree with Yates. I'm not running out there to be like, this guy's going to win me my entire league, with maybe the exception of one guy here. But for the most part, these are guys who I think are not quote unquote league winners, but are guys who can help your fantasy team going forward. So I'm still excited. Whatever, I don't care. I'll pick up Adrian Peterson right now. It doesn't matter to me.
All right, King Harris. So let's kick things off here with the running backs. And who is your number one ad this week at the running back position on the waiver wire?
Yeah, for me, it's got to be Elijah Mitchell. Look, the bottom line is this. I do not like Kyle Shanahan at the moment. As somebody who was recommending Brandon Ayuk to a lot of his followers, my bet on that one. I don't know what happened to make Trey Sermon inactive in this game exactly, other than suddenly even though we didn't say anything, he was basically the fourth best running back in camp, so we don't need him. Okay, that's fine. Joe, you had preached about Raheem Mostert's health or health concerns. That came to fruition immediately. 2 carries for 20 immediately, right? This was, by the way, something where I was live on air on our Betting Pros YouTube channel, youtube.com/bettingpros, and it came across that Sermon was, and we were like, hit the over on Raheem Mostert's rushing prop immediately. It was so low it jumped by 20 yards, and then everybody lost. Sorry about that as well. But regardless, Elijah Mitchell steps in. Mitchell looked great. 19 carries, 104 yards, is that what it was? I'm losing track at this point. And 104 yards in the touchdown. He was clearly the lead dog. JaMychal Hasty also scored a touchdown, but didn't factor in that much. I don't know whether or not we're going to see Trey Sermon next week going forward. I don't know if you guys, have I missed anything? As far as I know, we do not know any details about Raheem Mostert's knee injury,
Not
right?
yet.
I don't know if it's even going to keep him out, but Joe, you were all over it. I mean, Raheem Mostert's health situation is an issue. They have the Eagles next. Then they get Green Bay. That's obviously a matchup that you can attack. So for me, if Raheem Mostert is out, if Trey Sermon is really viewed as somebody who is the third or fourth best running back on his own team, then Elijah Mitchell in that offense can be an absolute difference maker. So he's really the guy, put aside running back, the only person on the waiver wire right now who I think is worth a significant fab investment.
All right, Elijah Mitchell, I think is an incredible trap, Yates. Do you want to convince me otherwise? I feel like this is Malcolm Brown all over again, where we're going to go ahead and chase this guy, and then next week, Trey Sermon's all of a sudden active, and Trey Sermon all of a sudden gets 20 carries, and I don't know, man. This is a very difficult one, and I know you haven't been the biggest fan of Mitchell either. Running the football in preseason, you made some not too pleasant comments about him, so all of this was just shocking. Your thoughts on Mitchell and Dan's number one pick?
Dan is absolutely correct that if these things happen, Elijah Mitchell will be a value based on where you picked him up on the waiver wire. He can absolutely be a solid RB2, high-end RB3. If these things break the correct way, then absolutely, if Raheem Mostert is out, if Trey Sermon truly is just buried on the depth chart, I don't believe that to be the case, though. And you're absolutely right, Joe. We could come out next week, and Trey Sermon could be the lead back in this offense. And I think Elijah Mitchell running for 104 yards on 19 attempts, and the score, he looked great. But there was a wide open rushing lane on his touchdown. He broke a couple of tackles there, but they weren't exactly the best tackle attempts. And it's the Detroit Lions defense. This is the big reason, and the reason why I had Raheem Mostert all the way up at RB12 on the week, especially once we found out that Trey Sermon wasn't active, was because it's the Detroit Lions defense. Anyone can run on them, especially in this Kyle Shanahan scheme. So Elijah Mitchell, I am not going super crazy. He is my number one running back ad on the week. I will preface that, because he does have the possibility of hitting, like Dan mentioned, if the things break his way, absolutely. But he is not a significant fab investment for me. I am talking about 10 to 15% max. I'm not going 20, 25. Don't get out of hand here. Elijah Mitchell definitely deserves to be picked up, but again, temper your expectations.
Counterpoint.
Sure. To your own number one? You're counterpointing yourself?
I'm counterpointing to the Yates' poo-pooing of his number one waiver wire pickup, which is fine. And Yates, of course, is brilliant, and I love him and is probably right. But regardless, the bottom line, here's the bottom line. I think if you have played fantasy football for a long time, I think you guys would probably agree with this, although tell me if I'm wrong. There are a finite number of guys who you can pick up who have the chance to make a giant impact in a fantasy league. Like, for the most part, we get these wide receivers, we get excited about them, or you get a running back maybe if there's a very, very clear-cut insurance policy. Most of those guys, by the way, are rostered already to have a guy who's widely available. And yeah, I understand if things break right, but there aren't that many things that need to break right. Like, what needs to break right? Raheem Mostert has to be injured. Okay, check the box. We've got that one already out.
Currently injured, right.
Currently injured, and who knows how long he's going to be out. And his health history, again, not great regardless. So even if he's back, I think the idea that he's going to stay healthy for the remainder of the season is questionable. Second, look, find me a plausible reason for this, Yates. Find me a reason that Kyle Shanahan had Trey Sermon inactive for this game, other than he doesn't think, for whatever reason, that he would be effective in this. Was it they thought they were going to win by so much they didn't want to waste the rookie, or what? You have to think this guy gets his chance unexpectedly and dominates with it. So I think it's fair to consider that he's probably tops in the pecking order right now behind Mostert. We have Mostert's injury. I think things have to happen to make him have value, but most of those things have already happened. So he's a guy who I'm willing to take the chance on. Even if ultimately it doesn't work out, the upside with him is so much greater than almost anybody else who's available on the waiver wire.
Yeah, look, it's first of all, I just want to say I take zero joy in Raheem Mostert being hurt. It sucks. I hate seeing players injured. So let me just start off with that. But once again, this is something you have to factor into your assessment of this team. What none of us could factor in. Nobody in the NFL, nobody in fantasy, nobody covering real football saw what happened yesterday coming with Trey Sermon being inactive and Brandon Ayuk being a non-factor. So we can all just kind of look around at each other, and no one has an answer for that. Perhaps we'll have more of an answer. My answer for week one, or should I say week two at this point, looking to add in the waiver wire, I want Kenneth Gainwell because I'm looking a little bit further ahead. Now, I've already got a lot of shares of him on rosters, so this should be no surprise to people who've heard me talk about him before. Week one against the Falcons, he had 9 carries for 37 rushing yards, 2 receptions, one of which for a touchdown. And what I see is this. This is week one of a rookie running back being part of the offense. It could possibly only get better from here, and you're not going to be spending nearly as much as you're going to have to get somebody like Mitchell, right? People will see Sanders in the depth chart and still think, well, it's all Miles Sanders, all that stuff. But if you're looking at Kenneth Gainwell, especially in PPR, there's a real-life scenario in these next 3 or 4 weeks that he could work himself into a very steady flex play kind of guy that you can feel pretty good about in PPR. And in half, perhaps you're looking at matchups. So Gainwell to me is more of a long-term play that you're going to invest in now on the cheap, because if he has another good game, forget it. But this might be the one where people kind of don't recognize it. It's a little under the waiver wire, should I say? And people should understand, that's right, it's never too early for dad jokes in the day. But it's flying a little under the radar. And I think that's the one that I want, and that's the one I want to move up, because I do think it's more than just the short term. And if there's an injury, you could get even more. Boys, what are your thoughts on Gainwell this week, adding him?
Yeah, it's you lead the way. I'll come in after.
Sure. So Gainwell, I've got at 3 in my running back rankings on the waiver wire. So with Gainwell, it was really surprising heading into the year. It was, okay, we know the talent, at least those who have like scouted and done into the NFL draft. It was like, we know the talent of Gainwell. I don't know why he fell to the 5th round of the NFL draft. He can absolutely make an impact for fantasy football if he gets the opportunity. But you had Boston Scott on this roster that battling for that RB2 role, and we saw Scott look pretty good in the preseason. So it was like, okay, Gainwell might eventually take over this job as we move throughout the season. Boston Scott didn't play a single snap on offense. He was only on special teams yesterday. So with Gainwell, I think that he's got the RB2 role now in this offense. And can he be a valuable option in PPR formats, especially when Philadelphia isn't playing with a massive lead the entire game? Like, yeah, if they're going to be playing from behind, you could see Gainwell involved. But I think his ceiling is like a Nyheim Hines. Like, that's kind of his role. I don't see him finding the end zone every single week, and that's what he needs. So Gainwell is a flex play for me moving forward in full PPR formats. I need to see a little bit more before I can move him up into the, maybe borderline RB2. Like, he's just going to be a guy that you can plug in as a safe option. He's worth adding. Don't get me wrong. He's worth adding, but I'm not going crazy and ranking him over Elijah Mitchell, in my opinion, or even the Tony Jones Jr., who we'll talk about in a minute.
Dan, your thoughts?
I agree with Yates for the most part. I do think that he should be rostered. He has a 5.8% rostered percentage. That's nonsense at this point again. And I was totally on board with everything that Yates was looking at him coming into this week, which is, okay, you're probably third in the pecking order because we're going to see Boston Scott, and then Boston Scott just did not exist in this game whatsoever. Also, we should say, again, to your point, the Eagles offense, I get that it was against Atlanta, but I loved what I saw from that offense. And I do think, again, we know this about rushing quarterbacks. It generally improves running backs and how they're able to function. So, Joe, if Gainwell does get a bigger piece of the pie, I would be very happy. With that said, Miles Sanders looked good. Like, he looked very good in this game. And again, so for me, he is the reason he is. I agree with Yates, by the way. He's my third running back. He's behind Tony Jones Jr., who we'll talk about in a second. But for me, the reason is I think Jones Jr. is going to offer a higher weekly floor with Kamara healthy, and then he also has the ceiling that someone like Gainwell had. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if, God forbid, something happened to Miles Sanders, if they make Jordan Howard active. I think he's on the practice squad, right? I don't think Gainwell just walks in and be like, hi, you're the bell cow now, since they've never wanted to do that with anybody. So that's what keeps him there for me. He should be added. I like him more now than I did coming into week one, but he's not a guy who I'm pushing to the top of my queue or anything.
The roster percentage for Gainwell is 6%. For Elijah Mitchell, it's 4%, just in case you're keeping score at home. Dan Harris, let's hear your other running backs 2 through 5 that you're looking to pick up this week.
Yeah, 2 is Tony Jones Jr., 3 is Kenneth Gainwell. 4 is Mark Ingram, just because I feel like I don't want Mark Ingram, but when a running back has 26 carries, like I can't really ignore exactly that. But again, that's like all right, I missed out on 75 other players, so I'll add him. And then Carlos Hyde, who, again, this is not fair.
If you missed out on 76 other players, then you'll add Carlos Hyde.
Carlos Hyde is somebody who I'm just like, I guess you're the rushing downs back right now. Forget about that James Robinson, just ridiculous. But again, I don't want any of those guys. I do want Tony Jones Jr., and I find it personally offensive to everything I've ever said on this podcast that Tony Jones Jr. is rostered in fewer than 20% of leagues. Guys, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know where you had Latavius Murray ranked before the whispers came in about the fact that, hey, he may not make this roster. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? Like, we all were just like, Latavius Murray is going to have that. I don't know where I had him, in the high 30s, probably somewhere, right? Like a guy who you are obviously drafting. Tony Jones Jr. is just Latavius Murray, but younger, and suddenly he's completely available on the waiver wire. That makes absolutely no sense. He's like slightly behind Elijah Mitchell for me. He needs to be added everywhere, 100% of leagues, everywhere, because not only does he sort of, again, Joe, this is what we're saying, he has the benefit of being a guy who you can get away with. He's going to have 8 to 10 touches every single game, pretty much, just like Latavius Murray did. Even in this game, they were way ahead, of course, but whatever, 11 for 51, he had a catch as well. But if anything happens to Alvin Kamara, high, maybe RB1, like, this is ridiculous. Pick up Tony Jones Jr. immediately, and don't make me yell about this ever again, please.
I don't like when Daddy yells. All right. Yates, who are the rest of your 2 through 5?
It is the exact same order. I've got Tony Jones Jr. at 2, Kenneth Gainwell at 3, Mark Ingram at 4, and then Carlos Hyde at 5. Again, with Mark Ingram and Carlos Hyde, no, I don't want to roster any of them. But with Tony Jones Jr., he was the guy that I was talking about leading into the season, was go get Tony Jones Jr. on the roster, because it looks like Latavius Murray, even if he sticks on the roster, is going to be the RB3. Tony Jones Jr. seemed to have the RB2 job locked up. And yeah, Dan's right, 18.8% rostered right now. That is just crazy. For Tony Jones Jr., yes, he's going to have standalone value. He's someone that you can plug in on bye weeks. He's someone that you feel comfortable with what you're going to get. But then the upside is just through the roof. If something were to happen again, God forbid, to Alvin Kamara. These are the things that we need to prepare for as fantasy managers. So Tony Jones Jr. right now absolutely needs to be rostered.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment as well. I actually have him at 4, but I can understand flip-flopping him and Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram just got so many carries in that game, and if that's what they're going to be doing every week, I don't know how long he can hold up, but I mean...
I bet they'll do that every single time they have a really, really positive game script. In other words, that was the last time.
That's never going to happen. But yeah, but I don't know. I mean, look, it's a crazy game, and week 1, lots of crazy things happen. It all depends on what your needs are right now, and if you're a team that needs carries right now and needs a running back, Mark Ingram at least gives you that shot. If not, you want to take Jones over him, that's fine. Elijah Mitchell's my 2. And then when it comes to the 5, like, I just refuse to spend any money on Carlos Hyde. I can't do it. I don't care. I'm just not going to do it. So I'll put Tevin Coleman in that mix too, and just maybe you see a little bit more balance there when they get home, especially against the Patriots. All right, let's move on to the wide receivers here. Yates, we'll start with you on this one. Who is your number one must-add wide receiver for Week 2 in the NFL?
It's my number one overall ad for the week. That is Mr. CPA himself, Tim Patrick. Come on down, my friend. Tim Patrick here. It's actually really surprising. I went and looked at the snap count for the Broncos wide receivers, and this was Nathan Yonke over at PFF tweeted this out, that even before the Jeudy injury, the snaps for the Broncos were Courtland Sutton with 29, Tim Patrick with 23, Jerry Jeudy with 23, and KJ Hamler with 11. So Tim Patrick coming into the year, we were like, okay, circle him, because if something were to happen to Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, or KJ Hamler, Tim Patrick is an incredibly talented wide receiver and probably one of the best wide receiver fours on an NFL depth chart right now. He could start for several other rosters in the NFL and be a significant contributor. So now he got more of an opportunity than I was even expecting, and it's evidenced by the snap count. Now we have Jerry Jeudy out for at least 6 to 8 weeks is the timetable being reported, at least rumored right now. So with a high ankle sprain, Tim Patrick absolutely needs to be picked up everywhere. Guess what his rostership percentage is right now? 0.8%. Ridiculous for Tim Patrick, who can be a consistent wide receiver 3 for your lineup moving forward. So Tim Patrick is a guy that I'm spending 15% of my fab on. I am absolutely looking to pick him up if I have a wide receiver need. And Tim Patrick, number one overall waiver wire ad for the week.
Just to be clear, too, because I don't think we really touched on it too well, when you were talking about your number one guys adding Mitchell before at running back, what was your percentage on that player?
That was 10 to 15%.
10 to 15. Dan, is that where you were too for Mitchell?
No, I think I was higher. Mitchell is a guy who, I'm higher than that. And again, there are two schools of thought with fab. I am generally judicious with my fab budget early on, but I do think that Mitchell is a guy who, if we find out that Mostert's out for a while, if what they said about Trey Sermon is true, then Elijah Mitchell is a guaranteed RB2. Yates said low end, I would think mid. Going forward. So he's the one guy who I'm willing to really spend up on. I'd spend up to, if I had to, 30% on him.
All right, for Gainwell, just to be clear for me, it was 5 to 10%. All right, let's go to your number one guy on the wide receiver list. Dan, who is it?
It's Patrick. I mean, and by the way, Joe, I don't know if you actually know this, since you joined the company after the season, but the reason that we call him the CPA is because I yelled and screamed, and Samantha Praviti was on one of our live streams, and we decided that everybody would want to roster Tim Patrick if he had a cooler name, but he sounds like he's your accountant, right? He has
I think I've heard this before, actually, yeah.
So that people ignore him, and people probably will ignore him right now again, because anyway, his line wasn't that great, right? What did he have? 4 catches for 39 yards? Mm-hmm. I think he did have the touchdown.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
he did have the touchdown. Mm-hmm. Fine. But I do think that people will not be fine, whatever. I think still people won't be that excited about him because everybody will be upset about Jeudy. And I do think Courtland Sutton, who did not have a good game here, again, we talked about it, coming into the week, that he was going to probably get a lot of Bradbury, so not a huge deal. I think Sutton will be absolutely fine. But Patrick was a guy, as Nate said, who you had mentioned, Yates, he was running in 2 wide receiver sets a lot even before Jeudy was injured. Now that Jeudy is injured and out for 6-8 weeks, which pour one out because, come on, Jerry Jeudy, you looked amazing and the breakout season was obviously here. He's just a guy who it's going to be really difficult to ignore, especially when your next 2 matchups are Jacksonville and the Jets. Tim Patrick, pick him up now before he goes off next week. He is my number one as well. Completely agree.
That Jerry Jeudy injury hurt my soul. I'm glad it's only a high ankle sprain and not more, but still, I mean, that's going to cut him out there for 6 to 8. He's going to be out, so that's very difficult. Patrick is my 2. Just to be clear, I agree with everything that the guys have said. I just want to throw one more out there as my number 1. It's Christian Kirk. Now, Christian Kirk went on a run last year that, again, people forget. There was about a month there where he was a touchdown money maker. And then the injury happened to Kyler Murray, and then he couldn't quite get rid of the football the way he wanted to, and the next thing you know, it all kind of went away. I was fascinated to see how this offense was going to run, because I heard a lot of rumors about, Kyler Murray's not going to run around, he's not going to be scoring touchdowns as much as he... Yeah. Well, that didn't last very long now, did it? So Kyler Murray gets around the goal line, and what does he do? He keeps running in the ball. Okay, he was also able to throw the ball and spread it around in a way that I don't think we've seen it yet, and the fact that he could do it in week 1 the way he did, that bodes very well for the long-term projectable value for Christian Kirk. So once again, I'm kind of looking further down the season, not just in the next 2 weeks, which is fine. It is perfectly fine, especially if you went 0-1 and got obliterated and you have some injuries. to look for Tim Patrick, to look for Elijah Mitchell, and just try to get a W in week 2. But I think Kirk, in terms of long-term value, is also a player that we've had investments in before, and it's been okay. I don't have high expectations for Kirk, but I think Kirk is a player that at least gives you some options, and you can play him and feel okay in most matchups. That's how I feel about Christian Kirk. So he's my 1. Patrick is my 2. Yates, who is your number 2?
Yeah, I've got Christian Kirk there. And I've got him for the reasoning of, you look at the Cardinals' final wide receiver snap count. It was DeAndre Hopkins with 60, AJ Green out there for 54 snaps yesterday, Christian Kirk with 37, and then Rondale Moore with 20. That is the big concern here, is heading into the year for Christian Kirk was, okay, well, we've got Larry Fitzgerald that has moved on. Maybe Christian Kirk can take on that bigger role in this slot, but all right, we saw Rondale Moore just be ridiculously hyper-targeted in the preseason, so maybe Kirk's not going to be a thing this year. And then we have Rondale Moore, and granted, it's his first game of his rookie season. We might see that usage, creep up here as we move throughout the season, but Christian Kirk was the wide receiver 3 in this offense, and he produced with this opportunity. And if Kyler Murray is going to look as good as he did yesterday, then we want the wide receivers that are youthful and productive in this offense. So, yeah, Christian Kirk for me, I have him at wide receiver 2 in my waiver wire rankings. I think that you can absolutely pick him up. But again, it's kind of falling into the same territory, and we're going to run through the rest of the wide receivers here. Like, it's kind of all in the same territory where I'm going to put in 5%, 8%, whatever bids
absolutely.
On all of them, and see what I get.
I could not agree more. And that was very, very kind of you. The way you phrased that is a nice way of saying AJ Green is old. That was very nice of you. I saw what you did there.
You guys didn't react, so I didn't know if you...
I reacted.
Okay,
I reacted. I was letting you kind of low-key just kind of throw that in there.
I just don't listen when you talk.
That's because you're old.
That's fair.
That's
why.
Yep, yeah, but yeah, I agree with Yates, by the way, also, that most of these guys we're going to talk about is in that 5 to 10 range kind of at the most. And maybe that's why you put a couple claims in and see who you get. And you don't kind of go crazy because I don't see any of the separators here. Dan Harris, let's talk about your grouping here. Who's your number 2 through 5? And then we'll go back to Yates's and we'll do mine.
Yeah, sorry, that was a little harsh, Yates. I'm sorry. I find your opinion very valuable. No. See, because that was too much. I tweaked it a little bit.
We found the line.
There's a line. I went past. I value your opinion. Anyway, Yates. I will say,
I can feel that HR meeting after this.
I know. I got basically an immediate sort of message.
That was the Nick Miller panic moonwalk. That was the panic moonwalk backwards out of that.
That's right. There you go. That's right. Some new girl humor. Okay. Anyway, I agree basically with the general sentiment that I don't have a huge preference for me after I get past 1. Tim Patrick is 1 with a bullet. And by the way, Joe, I do think that Tim Patrick and even Elijah Mitchell, this is not just I need to fix a short-term solution because Judy, again, as Yates said, 6 to 8 weeks is the current timeline. So I think Patrick is a guy you can play for a while. But my 2 is actually Rondale Moore. And the reason why I have him above, Yates is right. He did play. It was disappointing to see the snap count. He clearly was the 4th in the wide receiver pecking order. So that's what I kind of was hoping to not see. And with him being 4th and with him playing 20 snaps in the game, 5 targets, 4 catches for 68 yards. If we agree that AJ Green is old, or let's just say AJ Green is probably the least effective wide receiver currently on the Cardinals roster, we can say that, then what the heck are we going to see from Rondale Moore once he gets more than 20 snaps in the game, right? Like they know what they have right now. When he's in the game, he is being targeted, he is being utilized because they know he is an absolute difference maker. And you're not going to keep that guy getting 20 snaps. That's just not the way it's going to work. He is going to get more and more involved. And if he can do this with getting limited action, Joe, we're talking long-term. That's a long-term play. And again, this is a guy, it's confirmation bias a little bit, right? This is a guy I wanted in drafts.
I had him too. I'm with you.
Totally fine. Kirk, I am fine with. But I do think that this is probably almost less sustainable than Moore, absent them kind of pushing AJ Green to the side a little bit, right? I think if AJ Green is going to maintain his role, and maybe he will, like who knows, it's one game, let's not draw any crazy conclusions. It's not, Christian Kirk was clearly the 3rd wide receiver. He played more than half the snaps of the other guys, but it was clearly DeAndre Hopkins playing pretty much every snap, AJ Green playing almost every passing down snap, and then a drop down to Christian Kirk. If AJ Green is not pushed aside, I just don't think this is as sustainable as with Moore, who even with fewer snaps, I think can have the production. So Kirk is actually my 5th guy, but not that. Yeah, but again, there is not a huge bit separating Patrick with the bullet. Moore is my number 2. After that, long-term Terrace Marshall, Zach Pascal, and then Christian Kirk. Those are the only 5 who I think are really worth targeting.
You have Marshall all the way up at 3?
Oh yeah, I think Marshall needs to be added right now. right now,
Oh.
immediately. And would you like the reason? Yes.
Sure, I would like to hear it. Even if he
I don't wanna
doesn't,
hear
I
what
want
you
to
have
hear
to
it.
You
say,
do want to
but-
hear it. You're lying. I think that with the thing with Marshall is, again, a guy who should have been drafted. He's a guy, Yates, I think we feel like draft him, put him on your roster, see what happens in week 1. And with week 1, it wasn't that great. I think he had 29 yards receiving, but he had 6 targets and he had 3 catches, and Robbie Anderson had 3 catches, 1 reception. That 1 reception happened to be the most obviously bomb to Robbie Anderson play that any dumb Jets fan like me and Will sitting on the couch knew was coming right after the fumble. But regardless, 1 catch for Robbie Anderson, 3 targets. Marshall got more. And what I like about him is if he's going to be this involved right off the bat, I really want to see what's going to happen. Now, what I like about this is you can add him now for nothing, right? Because you guys are like, what are you doing adding him? Joe, long-term play, as we're sort of talking about. That's where I want to get to. In addition, he's got New Orleans, okay, coming up. New Orleans has a very good defense, even though they've suffered some injuries, obviously. After that, Houston and Dallas. That's where I want to see him, and I think he could explode. That's why I'm adding him now,
Great
if I
idea.
can. Maybe after next week, but on the off chance he goes off next week, then he's really going to be tough to get. You get him now, I think he might be playable in deeper leagues in those matchups already. So, again, the targets and the receptions being more than Robbie Anderson, that's something that made me kind of sit up and take notice a little bit.
Dan Harris proving yet again he is not just a pretty face. That is very astute to look ahead on Terrace Marshall, the upside. No, you're right, because as more of the weeks go by, more practice time you get, the more comfortable you get in the offense, and those are matchups you can absolutely exploit. Yates, let's run through the rest of your list, too, just so we get all your top 5 in there.
Yeah, for sure. So it's Tim Patrick at 1, Christian Kirk at 2, and then Sterling Shepard at 3, just based off of the target volume. Like, if we're going to assume that New York is going to be throwing the ball quite a bit here, they're going to be playing from behind. Sterling Shepard, I mean, what was it, 7 for 113 and a touchdown yesterday? Like, Kenny Galladay looked great. You know, bailed Daniel Jones out on a couple of big throws there. But Sterling Shepard is probably going to be the target leader in this offense. So I think he's worth an ad. But again, all these guys kind of just in the same range. DeVante Parker for me at 4, just leaning into the talent there. With DeVante Parker, he got more targets in this game than I anticipated that he would. So, and then Nelson Aguilar at 5. But Nelson Aguilar, I really don't want to add, but he's one of those guys that, like, he's going to be on your bench. You can plug him in as a flex option if you need to. And then next week, he gets the Jets secondary. So I think Aguilar can be a flex play for you. He got more targets than I thought he would.
Yates, on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry did the Zach Pascal game make you?
Oh, my word. I was like, Michael Pittman Jr., the process was there. The touchdowns went to the wide receivers. They just went to the freaking wrong wide receiver. So, yeah, Zach Pascal, 2 touchdowns yesterday. Like, I was just so upset. I was like, those could have gone to Michael Pittman Jr. And it would have been a massive game, but they
didn't.
But they did it. Michael Pittman. All right, here's my 5 guys. And once again, let's reiterate, we're all basically spending the same amount of fab on these guys. So you're somewhere in that 5 to 10. If you want to be a little bit more aggressive, depending on your needs, that's perfectly fine. Always remember that. Keep that in mind. Your team individually, you have to make your decisions. We're giving you a generalization, but every team is different. Every roster is going to have different needs. Make sure you address your roster needs as much as possible with these moves that you have to make. And it's okay to be aggressive if it already looks like a bad situation, that September is shaping up not to be a good month for you with some things that happened in week 1 and some injuries that have already happened. So for me, looking forward to the guys that I have on my personal list, I've got Christian Kirk at 1, Patrick at 2. Then I want to add Jalen Reagor, who is a player I told you, last couple weeks, Jalen Reagor, I feel like, is a guy that's going to get better this year, once again, over time. Nelson Aguilar, who had a touchdown yesterday, I didn't even talk about him. Nobody wants to talk about Nelson Aguilar, a guy who had a ton of touchdowns last year. 5 receptions on 7 targets, 72 yards, and a touchdown. Gee whiz, that sounds pretty good to me. I am with you guys on Sterling Shepard. He's my 5. Somehow, Gabriel Davis is also just owned in 10% of leagues. I just want to say, Gabriel Davis, Rondale Moore, DeVante Parker, even KJ Hamler. There's a ton of guys, including Terrace Marshall that Dan mentioned, that really, absolutely should be rostered. This is a really good week to load up on wide receiver guys. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not that high on Parker just because, once Will Fuller comes back, Waddle was impressive in this game. I'm just not sure that there's...
That's the one that I am, we asked that question about, Blaine asks that question every week of us, right? Who are you most worried about ranking in the waiver wire? And that was mine for that same reason, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have him particularly high. He looked good, to be clear. And there was once upon a time, DeVante Parker was this breakout wide receiver, which everybody was fawning over. So I don't hate it, but because Waddle looked good, because Fuller is coming back, because Tua, I mean, New England's a tough defense even without Gilmore, but he did not look like the gunslinging sort of like, oh, are we going to morph into this guy who's willing to just completely take chances in this game? So I think there's a little bit of a cap on the upside. And Shepard, by the way, Yates, I debated him. I had a tough time with him. He did get the targets, but I do wonder what happens now that Galladay is back and looked good. You're right. He saved Daniel Jones and gets more practice time and gets involved, whether or not he steals a lot of those targets, which is one of the reasons why I haven't ranked Shepard that high. But this is a deep sort of wide receiver week. And again, like you guys said, I don't think you have to spend a ton of fab on any of these guys, even Tim Patrick, because I don't think people are going to be out there looking to add him. I think you can add all these guys, and they have a chance to at least be serviceable going forward.
Yates, when it comes to DeVante Parker, are you in that same vein too? Like, was he difficult for you to add? I know you mentioned you had him on there. He did look good in that game, but Will Fuller is that unknown. He comes back this week, and you've got Jalen Waddle, who looked good in some moments, certainly had that touchdown too. And once again, when you have rookies that look good in the first week, that is nothing but a great sign, man. And Jamar Chase, fine. Oh my goodness, I was so happy Jamar Chase did something
Chase,
positive.
Smith, and Waddle all scored touchdowns.
All were so good. It was such a beautiful
what did we
thing.
say, by the way, Yates? What did we say? We want to see it. Let's just see it before we.
With
and
Chase
now we
and
saw
Smith.
it. And
now we're good. And now we're good. So when it comes to DeVante Parker, is that a dangerous guy for people to be adding this week?
It is, but it's kind of the same thing that I talk about with tight end rankings as we move into the week. It's like from 10 to 18, flip the order, and I really don't care. That's kind of the same thing with this wide receiver. It's like I've got DeVante Parker at 4, but I could easily see ranking him at 8. Yeah, they're all kind of the same amount of fab. DeVante Parker, I think you can go with. The guy that I do want to ask you guys' opinion on before we move on to like quarterback and tight end, KJ Osborn. What are we doing with KJ Osborn? He's got this wide receiver 3 job for Minnesota kind of locked down. Without Irv Smith on this roster, you've got Tyler Conklin and Chris Herndon is there, but they don't seem to be wanting to utilize the tight end position as much. And granted, they were playing from behind for the majority of that game, so their offense didn't exactly look like what they want it to be. But KJ Osborn, 9 targets yesterday. So, what are we doing with Osborn now? I've got him at 8 in my wide receiver rankings here for the waiver wire. I'm not looking to add him unless I'm in, a particularly deep league, but he's someone that I'm keeping an eye on because 9 targets, that'll play for fantasy.
Dan, I have him at 12, but to Yates' point about playing from behind, they are playing Arizona next week, so chances are they're going to have to throw the football a little bit. That would be my guess. What are your thoughts on Osborn?
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. I think where this ends up with is I need to see more from this Vikings offense because Adam Thielen also went crazy yesterday. Right. And I realized he scored the 2 touchdowns, which basically you take that to the bank with Thielen, but he also had a good yardage day, got a ton of targets, stuff like that. I'm not willing to draw the full conclusions yet, but I mean, you're right. You don't have to add one of these guys off the waiver wire. And Joe, to your point, Arizona, something tells me they're going to need to throw a little bit and put up points in that game, as will everybody who ever plays Arizona again. So stupid. But the way I do have him down, Joe, where you do, I have him at 13th, just because, again, I'm going through, right? Tim Patrick, Rondale Moore, Terrace Marshall, Zach Pascal, Christian Kirk, Jalen Reagor, Sterling Shepard, Nelson Aguilar, Gabriel Davis, DeVante Parker, these are a lot of quality guys out here. So the fact that Osborn, who I hadn't given 5 seconds of thought to before this game, has the good game, looks like he carved out that role, got a lot of targets. I need to see it one more time. I'm willing to be the guy that misses out on this because I didn't completely buy into week 1.
I just hope we're not here at Halloween going, Dan saying, I just need to see it a couple more times. Just 4 or 5 more times.
Okay.
That was our entire baseball season together, you and I.
You know this from baseball. Yates, you probably know this from football. I move at the speed of a snail whenever I do anything. And it's just because I put a lot of thought, as we all do, into our preseason evaluations, right? When we make our draft rankings, we do it for a reason. It's very difficult for me to just throw that out because I see a game, maybe 2, maybe 8, of something happening that I did not anticipate. So and sometimes that costs me, and I'm willing to live with it. But for now, I'm still willing to be okay if the lack of picking up KJ Osborn costs me.
Because of the depth this week, in particular wide receiver, I mean, we just went 12 deep pretty easily. I think there's a real strategy you could put out there in your league that you can just make dollar bids or $2 bids on a bunch of people and save and get a body or 2, just make sure you rank them in the order you want. You might be surprised and you might end up with 2 of these guys, and that's pretty good. And it might cost you all of maybe $4 or $5 together to do it. That is a real approach this week and save a little bit of money instead of trying to run up and overpay for somebody that might have even limited a period of time of helping you, because some of these other guys might be just as good if you're a team that looks very good and you just want to add some more talent. That is a real approach I think is very viable this week. You guys have any thoughts on that strategy when it comes to Fab this week?
Yeah.
The agreement?
Yeah,
okay,
agreed.
I think that's
Absolutely.
very useful to folks out there.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the quarterback position now. And oh boy, the quarterback position. How about that Aaron Rodgers, boy? Week 1, that was we talked about possible regression from Aaron Rodgers. I didn't know it was all going to happen in one game. That was not something any of us anticipated, and he blew a 3-game parlay for me. So thanks a lot, Aaron Rodgers. I really enjoyed your work there. But let's talk about
really quick. Benjamin Solak on Twitter, who he put out a tweet that said, I'm looking for it right now. Where the heck did it go? Aaron
Kill
Rodgers.
the show, Yates.
Here we go. Yeah, Benjamin Solak. Aaron Rodgers returning to Green Bay just to sabotage this season is a tremendous conspiracy theory that I am willing to spread.
With that said, I feel terrible for the Lions. And
Oh
what
God,
Aaron
it's gonna be
Rodgers
so bad.
is about
Monday
to do to them.
night.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Monday Night Football, no less, in Lambeau Field. Monday Night Football in front of a home crowd. 2 words, bloodbath. Is that one word? 2 words? I don't know. Whatever it is, it's going to be ugly. But let's talk about the rest of the quarterbacks here. Here's some of the guys on that fringe there in that 30% roster. We got Ben Roethlisberger, Tua, Jameis Winston, who had a bunch of touchdowns yesterday in that game. We were talking about Mac Jones, Sam Darnold. So there's some names out there, especially in that Superflex world, potentially like the Mac Jones or Sam Darnold if you're playing in a more shallow league that might be around there. Dan, let's start with you with this one. Who is your streaming quarterback or quarterback you want to add to your roster this week that might be on the waiver wire?
I would say that none of these guys is making me excited about streaming them in a 1-week sort of option. You always have these guys. I mean, obviously, Mac Jones gets the Jets. That's nice and everything like that. Teddy Bridgewater looked fine against Jacksonville. But the guy I'm picking up is Jameis, just because I think that it's pretty obvious there is enormous potential that you have with the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints in this one. Again, he's at Carolina. They're not, that great a defense anyway, but regardless, this is one of the few waiver wire quarterbacks who I'm willing to be like, I don't really care about streaming. I will pick you up to either have on my bench or if I need a starter long term, because I think that's what you're going to get. Now, he didn't need to do a crazy amount. The touchdowns obviously, inflated his value. I think he only threw for 148 yards or something like that because they just had the game completely well in hand. But come on now, this is an offensive system where anybody can succeed. He did throw the one pick that was negated by the completely nonsensical roughing the passer penalty. That's going to happen, but he's a guy who I think if you missed out on quarterback somehow in your league or you're in a 16-team league, he can start for you rest of season. So he's the guy. Don't care about streaming that much for this week. For the rest of the season, I'd be willing to roll with.
All right, well, if you're in a deeper league, let's say, or you had a couple quarterbacks and you need to stream one because you had Ryan Fitzpatrick or something as one of those 2 streamers, I don't know. How about you, Yates? Who's that one guy, a quarterback you think is worth picking up this week?
Jameis Winston's agent needs to get on the phone with LASIK right now and get the biggest endorsement, sponsorship, whatever. He needs to be hammering that home. Jameis Winston is the guy for me, and he's really the only one in this consideration where it's he is definitely someone that I'm looking to stream this week up against Carolina, but he also has some appeal as a potential season-long option for me. If he's going to come out here against the Green Bay Packers pass defense, which is not an easy matchup, right? Then and he's going to throw 5 touchdowns and look as good as he did. He also added 37 yards on the ground, which is valuable for fantasy as well. Then yeah, I'm going to consider you. So he's the only one there at the top of my list. And I'm saying stream him this week, but potentially he could be something more. Then you get to number 2 option for me is Teddy Bridgewater up against Jacksonville. It's Jacksonville. They made Tyrod Taylor look like Patrick Mahomes. And then Ben Roethlisberger is at number 3 just because of the matchup. We haven't seen what Baltimore is going to do to Las Vegas here tonight on Monday Night Football, but I'm not expecting it to be great. So I think from Las Vegas side. So I think Ben Roethlisberger, the offense did not look great for Pittsburgh, looked out of sync, but I do think that matchup is one that I will look at Ben as a streaming option.
Yeah, Big Ben's the top of the streaming options for me because it's at home against Las Vegas. Look, going into Buffalo was tough. I think the curve there is pretty difficult. They went in there and they won that football game. That was going to be a grinding, gritty kind of game anyway, so I give Roethlisberger a lot of credit. I think next week is going to be a lot more fun, a lot more beneficial for all of those Steelers players. So don't overreact to too much of what you saw last week. Also, by the way, Tyrod Taylor, he just kind of glossed over, but Tyrod Taylor right now had the 10th best quarterback fantasy performance on the week. 291 yards, 4 rushes for 40, 2 touchdowns, put up 24 points. He's QB 10 right now after this first game. Now, Lamar plays tonight, so we'll see if that pushes him down to 11. But That's pretty stunning right there. Yates, in the Superflex League, if Tyrod Taylor somehow did not get drafted, would you be adding him?
I mean, in a Superflex maybe, but I mean, he goes up against Cleveland this week, so it's a tough secondary. I'm not expecting him to do the same thing that he did to Jacksonville. We need to recognize that Jacksonville is a ship that is sinking. So yeah, it's not going to be pretty moving forward. That's a matchup that you want to attack. I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult here for the Houston Texans up against Cleveland this week. So I've got Tyrod Taylor actually at 8, all the way down at the bottom of my quarterback rankings.
Yeah, I've got him at 7, but because of the matchup as well. But I just want Tyrod Taylor to have a good day. You know, that guy has dealt with some really bad luck the last couple years. It has been a tough thing. He is still out there playing, so in a weird way, I'm rooting for him. It was nice to see him have that great game. It was nice to see Urban Meyer look so confused as well. That was fun. Let's talk about the tight end position here. Dan Harris, who is at the top of your tight end board?
For me, it's Gerald Everett. I didn't have a huge day, but he was a guy who was on my radar regardless. He was involved. This is not something where I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I need to get one of these tight ends. There really is nobody who I'm really going crazy over. Even Juwan Johnson, who obviously caught the 2 touchdown passes. I would personally prefer Everett because I think he is basically going to be the guy, but Will Dissly still factored in. So Everett, in a way of like, oh my God, I'm dead at tight end. I need somebody to sort of be there. I would pick him up for minimal fab, but I'm not wasting anything on anybody.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same. I've got Everett 1, Juwan Johnson 2, Cole Kmet's at 3, who I still think should be rostered in most leagues anyway by now. Yates, is there a specific order you have the tight ends this week in terms of adding them?
Yeah, I've got Cole Kmet at 1, and then
fair.
Gerald Everett at 2. And then once we get past that, it's like David Njoku, Juwan Johnson, Dalton Schultz. Like, those are the rest of the guys that I'm ranking. And I really, in one tight end leagues, like, I'm not looking their direction at all. But Cole Kmet is absolutely someone that we consider. According to PFF, he ran 32 receiving routes in Sunday Night Football's game. That was tied for 7th most in the NFL at the tight end position this past week. So I think Cole Kmet, the opportunity is there. Had 7 targets on the game. So like he's involved in this offense. Jimmy Graham I only saw 1 catch from Jimmy Graham. Like, he was not involved at all. I still don't understand why he's even on this freaking roster. But Cole Kmet, absolutely someone that you can look at if you are in a pinch at the tight end position. So Kmet and then Gerald Everett.
Next week, Dan, instead of me asking Yates on a scale of 1 to 10 how angry, I'm going to do it on a scale of 1 to Nagy. That's going to be my new scale for him. All right.
I think it should be 1 to Jimmy Graham still be on
1 to Jimmy Graham? Is that what you want to do? I was going to go right to Nagy, right to the top. Are you mad that you didn't get to see more Justin Fields? That was real tease last night, wasn't it? I mean, come on.
He looked great. But also,
Trey Lance throw a touchdown in one moment. Yeah, Justin Fields.
We got the rushing touchdown. We got the rushing touchdown from Justin Fields. We got a glimpse of what it could look like. Andy Dalton, actually looked okay, but he okay at executing a dink and dunk offense, not like what we needed to be able to compete with the Rams. But that's another conversation.
I'm glad you're able to get that off your chest because that felt very healthy for you. You're welcome.
Yep.
That's why Monday is going to be like therapy. I feel like it's going to be like we're all getting to come here, talk about some things that went well, talk about some things that nobody saw coming. But this is the fun. This is what it's about. Fantasy football is supposed to be fun. Last time I checked. So don't forget that. Don't lose sight of that. Also, don't lose sight of streaming defense this week because I want all the Green Bay Packers defense. I understand it was ugly, but you ain't seen nothing yet till you see Monday Night Football, Aaron Rodgers bounce back in a big way and then put an absolute hurting on the Detroit Lions. Oh, baby, give me the Packers as the streaming defense this week. That's it. End of story. You can make a case for the Saints, whatever. That's fine. It's all about the Packers. Enough said. I'm moving on. Yates, any thoughts on the streaming defense this week?
I will go with New Orleans above Green Bay, just with the garbage time production. Yeah, I think that Green Bay is going to put the smack down on Detroit, but then they might let up like San Francisco did, and we could see Detroit come back and rack up the points in the fourth quarter when it doesn't matter, and they put their second string defense in. New Orleans Saints for me up against Carolina. I mean, they just shut down Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers did not look like Aaron Rodgers, but they still just shut down Aaron Rodgers. So I'll go with New Orleans Saints there, but again, that's a matchup that I'm not like, yeah, you got to play New Orleans. It's just the best of the options available.
I will say this. The 49ers letting the Lions back into that game at the end, I think was a good wake-up call also for that Packers defense to know that they cannot take their foot off the pedal. So normally I would agree with you. Oh, that's a big, like if they had gotten blown out and been like, oh, here we go. But because you saw them creep back in, you got, okay, we got to play 4 quarters here because that was an embarrassment. They're going to get their butt kicked in practice this week. I can tell you that. Dan Harris, streaming defense for week 2. Who you got?
I will also go with the Saints. Again, I probably watched that Jets-Carolina game a little more closely maybe than you guys did, just because I had it on right there in front of me and let Will make fun of me. But I will say that I root for Sam Darnold. I'm glad that he had a solid day. I did not watch that game and come away thinking, yeah, Sam Darnold's a guy who's going to really just be a very, dominant quarterback in this league. So I think when you have a real defense like the Saints taking him on, I think there are going to be turnovers. I think there are going to be sacks. There are going to be points for that defense. So I will go with them, but I will say again, Packers are going to put up some points. They're DST, so no problem with them, but Saints is my number one.
All right, we're going to do a little lightning round here. We're going to go through some players who are on that fringe, maybe that 50% range in terms of rostership, and guys, whether or not you should drop or keep them. So you don't have to give too much of a reasoning. We could just kind of run through them. Let's start with Darnell Mooney. Yates, drop or keep?
I'm keeping him. I think that this offense, like I said, it's a dink and dunk, but I still think that he can soak up targets. He's the number 2 option here. He'll be valuable.
And it's only a matter of time before you get Fields. Come on, boys and girls. Yep. It's going to happen here. What about you, Harris? Drop or keep Darnell Mooney?
100% keep. I think if you liked him coming into the season, as I think probably we all did, because we all talked about him as a sleeper, really the fact that he didn't do much against the Rams team in that game means nothing to me. So I'm keeping him without question.
Dan Harris, Phillip Lindsay rostered in 47% of leagues right now. Drop or keep?
Drop. Not just because Mark Ingram was the dominant force in that game. And Lindsay did score a touchdown. I just really don't want even the dominant force in that backfield. So I'm dropping. I'm moving on completely.
Yates, how about Lindsay for you?
Damn, what was my line last year? Drop kick him like Baxter off the bridge. Yeah, I'm getting Phillip Lindsay off my rosters.
Oh, Yates is definitely in a glass case of emotion today. Boy, oh boy. Elijah Moore. How about you, Yates? Drop or keep Elijah Moore?
This was my concern with Elijah Moore and having him as one of the guys that you drafted.
This was my nightmare.
At the bottom of your bench was just like, he's probably not going to get off to a hot start here to begin the year, and you're going to have to hold on to him until he does turn into something maybe later on in the year. So Elijah Moore, I'm dropping him.
Dan?
Shoulder shrug. I'm fine to drop him. The Jets' offensive line is bad. Mekhi Becton's now going to be out for a while. I don't expect Zach Wilson to have much time to throw. When he throws, he is probably going to throw to Corey Davis, as he should. So there could be good games for him down the road, but for the most part, I don't want this. So
okay. Dan, do you want Tyrell Williams on your team?
I do not. Okay. I want 3 players from the Lions on my team. I want both running backs, and I want TJ Hawkinson, and then I want to close my eyes and not see how the points accrue, but just enjoy them when they do. So I will say absolutely not.
I had such a warm feeling in the cockles of my heart watching Jamal Williams in that game. I got to tell you, I'm not going to lie. How about you, Mr. Yates? How about Tyrell Williams for you? Drop or keep?
I missed on this one, guys. Projections, I was like, no, there's no way that TJ Hawkinson's going to see that much of the target share. Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift, they'll be involved, but you still got wide receivers on this team. Apparently they don't care. So it goes to TJ Hawkinson. It's going to go to Jamal Williams. It's going to go to DeAndre Swift. Yeah, don't roster Tyrell Williams.
All right, what about Russell Gage, Yates? Because that's a player.
Drop him. Get him off your roster.
Yeah, wow. Yep. Oh my. Woo, no hesitation. My goodness. A little overwhelmed there. Dan Harris, Russell Gage, drop or keep?
Drop. What was there to? This is not supposed to happen with Russell Gage, right? Russell Gage is supposed to be your safety net that you're like, I'm not shooting for the upside. I'm shooting for the guy who's just going to give me some points, not 2 targets, 0 receptions.
It was one game. It was
and
one
an offense that looked like the 3 of us playing football against the professional football team. No, I don't want it, Joe. I'm not kidding. I'm done. I'm completely off. Kyle Pitts, good. Calvin Ridley, good. Mike Davis, good. I'll consider Cordero Patterson if you want me to, but not Russell Gage. I'm out.
Beef, good.
All right.
Custard, good.
Oh, what a trifle we build. All right, Michael Carter. I'll do another one here. Dan Harris, keep or drop?
You know what? Forget this. I'm dropping. And look, the bottom line is this. I said this coming in, so I feel like a hypocrite. I don't care. I'm willing to be a hypocrite right off the bat. If you roster,
does it make you a hypocrite, or does it make you somebody who's willing to put in work, admit when it's wrong, and fix it right away, instead of trying to cling to something and trying to make something happen, like Josh Gordon's going to come back and be good, like the way people have been doing that for the last 10 years, it felt like.
No, I really appreciate that. I really I was going to say I really appreciate you trying to help me out, but no, it makes me a hypocrite because what I said
buried
is if you draft, he did, but he's right there.
That's what I do.
If you drafted Michael Carter, I said you got to be prepared for the long haul, right? You're not going to start him right off the bat. So just hold him and stuff like that. And it's week 1, and he obviously did nothing. And I'm like, all right, time to get rid of him. The reason is, again, the offensive line looks absolutely abysmal. I don't think you're going to have, I know they want to run, but you're going to need an injury to both Johnson and Tevin Coleman for him to have any value for at least 7-8 weeks at this point. You just can't do that at this point. Like, I'd rather be picking up one of these wide receivers that's on the waiver wire that might be able to help me now. So I'm dropping.
All right, there you have it. So some hard lessons of week 1. Dan Harris, what was your big takeaway from week 1 as we try to turn the page and look forward?
My big takeaway from week 1, I guess the biggest thing is that I will never again trust a 49ers player not named George Kittle, because I had no idea. I've never seen this, guys, where I've had absolutely no even whisper,
not even an inkling
forget about Trey Sermon for a second. That was crazy, but at least it's fine. But suddenly we've got, hi, Brandon Ayuk. By the way, we didn't think you played like a pro in practice. You had the hammy injury. We felt like you really tailed off. So we're not going to say anything. But by the way, when we get out there, you're just going to play half the snaps and barely be involved whatsoever. Absolutely ridiculous. So I don't know how I will ever trust anybody on the 49ers ever again. I have major trust issues with San Francisco.
All right. So Dan has major trust issues after week 1. How about you, Yates? What's your big takeaway from week 1?
My big takeaway is that Austin Eckler currently leads the NFL in red zone rushing attempts and had 0 targets. So just like we all predicted.
It's week 1, everybody. Things
are
going to correct
me of
themselves.
the Seinfeld episode of I'm going to do the opposite of every instinct.
Costanza.
Everything I've ever had, I'm just going to do the opposite. And that's what it was. I mean, just absolutely nothing. And what's funny, guys, you know that I pounded the desk on one prop. It was the under Austin Eckler 6 rushing touchdowns on the season. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh no. But my guess is that But my guess is again that he will be more involved in the passing game. But this is something that we should monitor because it is a new coaching staff. Who knows what they're going to want to do exactly? But man, that was bizarre.
Yes, we got Monday Night Football tonight. You want to make a prediction here so we can come back and be wrong tomorrow about that Ravens backfield?
All right, let's go bold. Tyson Williams, top 12 running back on the week. Why
yes, not? I'm on there with you. Let's go. You and me together on that one. We'll put our Michael Pittman differences aside. We'll join hands and run through the valley with Tyson Williams. How about you there, Dan? What do you want to do with this Ravens backfield tonight?
I think Tyson Williams is going to be the guy, and he is going to be more valuable than people expect here in week 1. But I will make one other bold prediction on the game, which is Lamar Jackson finishes as the QB1, just because if he does, that will cost me and Will 3 combined leagues. So I am mentally preparing myself for that. So at least I'll be right on the bold prediction piece of it.
This is what happens when you draw your kids into the game. My big takeaway, too, from week 1, because my daughter had her first all-girls flag football game Saturday. She was so enthralled with it, had so much fun. Sunday, she was sitting there with me, and she went to the table. She got the whiteboard. She started drawing up plays. Oh, my goodness. Could I possibly be more proud? Is a beautiful thing. So don't forget, this is fun. You're supposed to enjoy yourself, and thanks for listening to us today. And look, part of enjoying yourself is doing it the right way, which is what we do here on Fantasy Pros. So go to fantasypros.com/myplaybook to help you all season long. Use that waiver assistant while you're there. And don't forget about fantasypros.com/offers, where you can make a $10 deposit on one of our partner sites and get 6 free months of that Hall of Fame package. That's a $65 value. That gets you waiver assistant. It gets you autopilot. It gets you all kinds of things, and that's what you need. I want to thank our sponsor of today's show, which is TickPick. Again, go to tickpicks.com/pros, TickPick.com/pros, and DraftKings as well. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Yates and Dan Harris, I'm Joey P. We will see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.